I never thought the cruelest words of my life would come from my own son, as we were burying his mother. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell because we have new stories every day, leave a like, and tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. My name is Robert Miller, I'm 67 years old, and what I'm about to tell you forever changed my perception of family, loyalty, and how far human evil can go. This story began long before my dear Elizabeth's funeral, but it was on that very day, the 15th of March 2024, that everything became painfully clear. Elizabeth Reed Miller, my wife of 42 years, had passed away 3 days earlier after a 6-month battle with the aftermath of a stroke. It left her confined to a wheelchair, unable to speak, and completely dependent on my care and that of Rose Martin, the nurse I hired to help me. The funeral was held at St. Michael's Church in the heart of downtown Chicago, the same church where we got married in 1982. It was a gray March morning, with that fine rain that seems to cry with you. About 150 people had come, former colleagues from my time as commercial director at the Martinez & Associates textile company, neighbors from the Lincoln Park neighborhood where we lived, some distant relatives, and of course, our son, Adam Miller. Adam was 35, and if I'm being honest with myself, he had never been the son Elizabeth and I dreamed of having. Starting at age 12, he got into drugs in high school, first marijuana, then cocaine. We spent a fortune on therapy, psychologists, private rehab clinics. The Street Teresa Clinic cost us $18,000 in 2008. The New Horizon Clinic another $22,000 in 2012. But nothing worked. However, that day at the funeral, something seemed different about Adam. It wasn't sadness that caught my attention, but the absence of it. While I sobbed in front of the oak casket where Elizabeth lay, dressed in her favorite navy blue dress, Adam stood a few feet away, with an expression I can only describe as calculating. During the ceremony, Father Anthony Johnson, who had known our family for over 20 years, spoke about Elizabeth's kindness, about how she had dedicated her life to working as a teacher at Riverside Elementary School for 35 years. He recalled how she always found time to bake cookies for school festivals, how she organized the Christmas plays. I listened to every word with a shattered heart, remembering the woman I had lost not once, but twice. First, when the stroke took her from me mentally in September of 2023, and now, for good. But as my tears fell uncontrollably, I noticed Adam checking his phone, sending messages. He even yawned once. His girlfriend, Natalie Vega, a 28-year-old woman with bleached blonde hair, seemed more interested in watching the other attendees than in paying her respect. After the Mass, as we carried the casket to the hearse, Adam approached me. I was hoping, perhaps naively, for some word of comfort. Instead, what I received sent a chill down my spine. He leaned into my ear and whispered with a coldness I will never forget, "You're next, old man." And then, to my absolute horror, he walked away laughing. I stood there paralyzed, still holding one of the handles of my wife's casket, processing what I had just heard. The cruel smile on his face as he walked away toward Natalie confirmed that I had heard correctly. The rest of the ceremony at St. Francis Cemetery passed in a blur. I vaguely remember Father Anthony's words, the sound of dirt falling on the casket, the hugs of condolence. But my mind kept replaying those 5 words over and over. "You're next, old man." Rose, the nurse who had cared for Elizabeth during her final months, squeezed my hand and told me, "Mr. Miller, Mrs. Elizabeth was a very special woman. I'm going to miss her so much." Those words moved me deeply, because Rose had shown more genuine affection for Elizabeth all day than my own son had. As I walked to my gray Volkswagen Passat, I felt completely lost. Not only had I buried my wife, but I had discovered something disturbing about my only son. However, I still had no idea that the worst was yet to come, and that those cruel words at the funeral were just the beginning of a revelation that would change my life forever. The funeral was over, but my true test as a father and as a man was about to begin. The 6 months before Elizabeth's death had been the most challenging of my life. It all started on the 12th of September, 2023, during a family dinner I had organized to celebrate my wife's 64th birthday. We had invited Adam and Natalie, hoping it would be a special occasion to bring us together as a family. I remember the menu perfectly that night. My mom's famous lasagna, Elizabeth's favorite, which I had prepared following her mother's recipe. I had also bought a bottle of 2015 Napa Valley Cabernet from the Marqués de Riscal winery, which cost $45 at the Macy's wine shop on State Street. Elizabeth looked radiant that night. She wore a cherry-colored dress that enhanced her gray hair, which she wore up in an elegant bun. During dinner, we talked about our travel plans for the next year. She dreamed of visiting Portugal, specifically Porto, as she had always wanted to see the wineries of the Douro Valley. "Robert," she said to me as she served dessert, a homemade flan she had prepared in the afternoon, "after you retired last year, we'll finally have time for all those adventures we've been putting off." Her eyes shone with that excitement I loved so much in her. Adam had arrived late, as always, around 9:30 at night, when we had already started the first course. Natalie was with him, wearing a tight black dress and towering heels that clicked against the marble floor of our dining room. From the moment they walked in, I noticed a certain tension. During dinner, the conversation turned awkward when Elizabeth mentioned that we had decided to donate $25,000 to the Caritas Chicago Foundation for their program to help families in need. $25,000? Adam asked, abruptly dropping his silverware. "Don't you think that's an excessive amount, Dad?" "Your mother and I have been blessed financially," I replied calmly. "After selling the textile company last year, we have more than we need to live comfortably." Natalie chimed in with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But, Mr. Miller, you never know what medical expenses might come up in the future. At your age, it's important to keep reserves." Elizabeth was visibly annoyed. "At our age? We're 67 and 64 years old. We're not invalids." It was right after she said those words that it happened. Elizabeth brought her right hand to her temple, frowning as if she felt a sudden pain, and murmured, "I feel strange." Her words became slurred. The right side of her face drooped, and before I could react, she collapsed from her chair. The next few minutes were chaotic. I immediately called 911 while Adam stood frozen, staring at his mother on the floor. Natalie, surprisingly, was the one who showed the most initiative, helping me place Elizabeth in the recovery position until the paramedics arrived. The ambulance from the Chicago Fire Department arrived in 12 minutes. The medical team, led by emergency Dr. Charles Rueda, immediately confirmed that Elizabeth had suffered a massive stroke. They rushed her to University General Hospital. The neurologist, Dr. Frank Castillo, explained the severity of the situation to me the next morning. "Mr. Miller," he said with compassionate professionalism, "your wife has suffered an extensive stroke that has affected the areas of language and mobility. She has survived, but the after effects will be permanent." Elizabeth remained in a coma for 5 days. When she finally woke up, the reality became clear. She had completely lost the ability to speak, and the entire left side of her body was paralyzed. The doctors explained that she would need specialized care 24 hours a day. After 3 weeks of hospitalization, which cost $8,400 for a private room and specialized treatments, we brought Elizabeth home. I immediately hired Rose Martin, a certified nurse with 15 years of experience in neurological care. Her salary was $2,200 a month, plus an additional $800 for working weekends. We had to completely adapt the house. I installed a stairlift that cost $3,200, converted the first floor study into a bedroom for Elizabeth, and bought an electric hospital bed for $1,800. The expenses for specialized medications reached $400 a month, anticoagulants, blood pressure medication, and nutritional supplements. From the beginning, Adam showed an attitude that is painful for me to remember. During the first few weeks after the stroke, he barely visited. When he finally did come, his comments were always about the cost of care. "Dad," he said to me one day in October, while watching Rose patiently feed Elizabeth, "do you really need so much professional help? There are specialized nursing homes that could be more affordable." "Your mother is not going to any nursing home," I replied firmly. "After 42 years of marriage, I'm going to take care of her here, in her home. But the costs are piling up," he insisted. "Between the nurse, the medications, the therapies, you're spending over $4,000 a month." It was true that the expenses were considerable, but we had enough resources. The sale of my textile company in January 2023 had brought us $850,000, in addition to our life savings. We could afford to give Elizabeth the best possible care. Adam's comments became more frequent and more direct. In November, he took me aside and said with a coldness that surprised me, "Dad, be realistic. Mom isn't the same person anymore. She's suffering your suffering, and the money is disappearing. Maybe it would be more humane to consider other options." "What kind of options?" I asked, though I feared the answer. "Options that would let her rest in peace," he replied, avoiding my gaze. The last 3 months were especially difficult. Despite all our efforts, Elizabeth began to decline. The medication seemed less effective. She suffered from episodes of unexplained fever, and her appetite decreased drastically. Rose was worried and suggested consulting with the cardiologist, Dr. Louis Moreno. During those last months, Adam increased his visits, but not out of filial love. He would come with Natalie, and both would make comments about unnecessary expenses and Elizabeth's quality of life. One afternoon in February, I overheard Natalie asking Rose if all those medications were really necessary. On the 12th of March 2024, Elizabeth suffered the massive heart attack that ended her life. It came suddenly, while Rose was helping her with lunch. The paramedics tried to resuscitate her for 40 minutes, but it was no use. My dear wife died at 2:35 that afternoon. Now, remembering that painful period after the funeral, I was beginning to have terrible suspicions about Adam's comments, about his insistence on the expenses, about his suggestions to let his mother rest. But I still didn't know to what extent my suspicions would be confirmed in the most brutal way possible. 3 days after Elizabeth's death, while organizing the final details of the burial, I couldn't get her last weeks of life out of my mind. There was something that didn't add up, but my grief was so deep that I couldn't fully process my concerns. The funeral was approaching, and I had barely slept, submerged in memories and a sadness that seemed to consume me from within. The morning of March 15th dawned gray and damp, as if the sky shared my grief. I got up at 6 a.m., unable to stay any longer in the bed I had shared with Elizabeth for so many years. I made coffee in the kitchen, the same Colombian coffee she used to buy at the gourmet shop on Bettis Street, and for a moment, I forgot that I would never have to pour 2 cups again. Adam had arrived the night before with Natalie, supposedly to help me with the arrangements, although their help was limited to criticizing the funeral expenses. "Do you really need the solid oak casket?" he had asked me while reviewing the bill from the San Bernardo funeral home. "It costs $2,800, Dad. There are more reasonable options." I explained that Elizabeth deserved the best, that we had saved our whole lives precisely for moments like these, but Adam insisted on talking about money as if the expense were more important than giving his mother a dignified farewell. During the drive to the funeral home in my Volkswagen, Adam and Natalie sat in silence in the back seat. I occasionally heard them murmuring to each other, but I attributed their whispers to the solemnity of the moment. Now I realized they were probably finalizing the details of something much more sinister. The funeral proceeded as planned. Family, friends, and acquaintances filled the funeral home's chapel. Carol Jimenez, the former principal of the school where Elizabeth taught for decades, said some beautiful words about my wife's dedication to her students. Elizabeth Reed, she said, her voice breaking with emotion, was a teacher who made a difference in hundreds of children's lives. Throughout the ceremony, I discreetly watched Adam. His behavior struck me as strange. He constantly checked his watch, exchanged meaningful glances with Natalie, and on several occasions, I saw him smile inappropriately while others were crying. When Rose approached to offer her condolences and told me with tears in her eyes how much she had loved Elizabeth, I noticed Adam roll his eyes. After the religious ceremony, while we were carrying the coffin to the cemetery, the moment that would change everything happened. Adam came up to me and with a blood-curdling smile whispered, "You're next, old man." His subsequent laughter echoed in my ears like a direct threat. At Street Francis Cemetery, during the burial, I tried to process what I had heard. Had it been a tasteless joke? But his expression throughout the day contradicted any innocent explanation. He seemed expectant, as if he were waiting for something else to happen soon. After throwing the last handful of dirt on Elizabeth's casket, people began to say their goodbyes. Some distant relatives invited me to lunch, but I just wanted to go home and process my grief in solitude. However, before I left, I needed to use the cemetery's restroom. The facilities were in a small building near the main entrance. As I walked down the marble hallway towards the restrooms, I heard familiar voices coming from the adjacent waiting area. I immediately recognized Adam's voice and instinctively stopped. "It's done," Adam was saying in a tone I had never heard from him, cold and calculating. "Now all that's left is the old man." "Are you sure no one suspects anything about Elizabeth?" Natalie asked nervously. "Please," Adam replied contemptuously. "Everyone thinks she died from complications of the stroke. No one is going to question a heart attack in a 64-year-old woman with a history of neurological problems." My heart began to pound so hard I was afraid they could hear it. I pressed myself against the hallway wall, trying to become invisible as I continued to listen. "But your father looks very healthy," Natalie insisted. How are you going to make it look natural? I have several options, Adam replied with a coldness that terrified me. We could poison him gradually, like we did with Mom, or sabotage the brakes on his car. An accident would be quicker and less suspicious. The word poison hit me like a lightning bolt. Had they poisoned Elizabeth? My wife hadn't died of natural causes. She had been murdered by our own son. How much do you think he'll inherit? Natalie asked. According to my calculations, about $1,200,000 between savings, the house, and investments, Adam replied. Enough to go live in Costa Rica like we always dreamed. No one will ask us questions there, and with that money, we can live like kings for decades. What if he suspects something? He's an old man, tired, grieving. Adam laughed cruelly. He's completely helpless. Besides, who's going to believe his own son wants him dead? My hands were shaking as I fumbled for my cell phone in my coat pocket. With trembling fingers, I activated the audio recorder just as Adam continued talking. What bothers me most is all the money he wasted on taking care of Mom these last few months, my son continued. More than $25,000 thrown away on nurses, medicines, therapies, money that was our family inheritance. At least we don't have to worry about those expenses anymore, Natalie commented. Exactly, and when the old man is dead, there will be no more medical bills, no more donations to stupid charities, no more sentimental splurging. It will all be ours. I recorded about 3 minutes of their conversation before I heard footsteps approaching down the hall. I quickly put the phone away and pretended to be washing my hands in the bathroom when Adam and Natalie appeared. Dad, Adam said with a fake smile, we were looking for you. Are you ready to go? I looked him in the eyes, trying to keep my expression neutral while internally processing the monstrosity of what I had just discovered. This man, smiling at me, had murdered his own mother, and was planning to kill me too. Yes, I managed to articulate. I'm ready. During the ride back, every word Adam directed at me sounded different. When he asked if I was okay, if I needed help with anything at home, I heard the questions of a predator sizing up its prey. That's not necessary, I replied with all the calm I could muster. I need to be alone to process all this. Of course, Dad, Adam said with false understanding. Grief is a personal process, but remember that we're here to support you in anything you need. When we finally got home and they left, I locked myself in my study, my heart pounding violently. I played the recording several times, confirming that it hadn't been a nightmare. The voices were clear, the confessions explicit. My son had murdered my wife, and was planning to murder me too. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my favorite armchair, holding my phone with the evidence that would change everything. I knew I had to act, but I also knew I had to be very careful. Adam thought I was a helpless, grieving old man, and that perception could be my greatest advantage. At dawn on March 16th, I made the decision that would define the rest of my life. My son would pay for what he had done to Elizabeth, and I would make sure he could never harm anyone else again. The early morning of March 16th was a torturous vigil. Sitting in my study, surrounded by family photographs that now seemed like testaments to a lie, I began to relive every moment of Adam's life, searching for signs I had ignored, clues that would have warned me about my son's true nature. I vividly remembered the day he was born, the 8th of April, 1988. Elizabeth had a difficult delivery at Macarena University Hospital, and when we were finally able to hold him, he seemed like a perfect baby. He weighed 7 pounds, had dark hair like mine, and his mother's green eyes. He's going to be a special boy, Elizabeth had murmured, exhausted but radiant. The first few years were normal, even promising. Adam learned to walk at 11 months, said his first words at 13. He was smart, curious, liked to take toys apart to see how they worked. I remember his favorite toy was a Lego construction set I gave him for his 5th birthday. It cost $89 at the Macy's toy store. However, the problems started early. At age 6, his teacher at St. Patrick's School, Miss Helen Vasquez, called us in because Adam had intentionally hurt a classmate during recess. It wasn't an accident, the teacher explained with obvious concern. Adam twisted James Ruiz's arm deliberately, and when I asked him why he did it, he said he wanted to see if he could make him cry. Elizabeth and I thought it was a normal phase of childhood. We talked to Adam, explained that hurting others was wrong, and he promised us with tears in his eyes that he would never do it again. We thought the problem was solved. But the incidents continued. At 8, he purposely killed his imaginary sister's hamster. I say imaginary because Elizabeth could never get pregnant again. We found the little animal drowned in a glass of water in his room. When we asked him what had happened, Adam told us with unsettling calm, I wanted to see how long it could swim. The child psychologist, Dr. Manuel Herrera, whom we consulted on the pediatrician's recommendation, reassured us, saying that some children go through phases of experimenting with the limits of life and death. With the right guidance, he'll outgrow this stage, he told us during a consultation that cost $120. We paid $1,800 for 6 months of child therapy. But the strange behaviors didn't stop. At 10, he partially set fire to the backyard shed to see what would happen. At 11, we found a box under his bed full of dead insects he had been collecting and dissecting. It was at age 12 that we discovered his first contact with drugs. The principal of Blas Infante High School, Mr. Anthony Morales, called us in urgently one Tuesday in October of 2000. In his office, he informed us that they had found Adam selling ecstasy pills to younger classmates in the school bathrooms. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, the principal said gravely, this is not teenage experimentation. Your son had 15 pills in his possession and was keeping a detailed sales ledger. He's acting like a small-time dealer. The suspension was for 2 weeks, but the damage to our family's reputation was considerable. Elizabeth cried every night, wondering where we had failed as parents. Robert, she would say between sobs, we've given him everything, love, education, values. Why is he taking this path? We then hired a psychologist specializing in adolescence, Dr. Frank Jimenez, whose sessions cost $150 each. For 8 months, Adam attended therapy twice a week, but the doctor informed us that our son was showing extreme resistance to treatment. He's very manipulative, Dr. Jimenez confessed during a private meeting in February 2001. He tells me exactly what he thinks I want to hear, but there's no genuine remorse. The high school years were a constant nightmare. Adam went through 3 different schools. Blas Infante High School expelled him permanently for drug trafficking. John Bosco Salesian School kicked him out for physically assaulting a teacher, and he finally ended up at Martinez Montañez Public High School. The most traumatic episode occurred when Adam was 16 in July of 2004. He had come home around 2 in the morning, visibly intoxicated. Elizabeth was waiting up for him in the living room, worried as always. "Where have you been, son?" she asked with motherly affection. Instead of answering, Adam started yelling profanities, accusing her of trying to control him. When she tried to calm him down, he pushed her with such force that Elizabeth fell against the coffee table, hitting her head on the glass edge. I came running from the bedroom when I heard the crash and the screams. I found Elizabeth on the floor, with a gash on her forehead that was bleeding profusely, while Adam stood there, looking at her without any remorse. "What have you done to your mother?" I yelled, kneeling beside Elizabeth. "She fell on her own," Adam replied coldly. "It's not my problem, she's so clumsy." At that moment, something inside me broke. I stood up and confronted my own son, but he punched me in the stomach, knocking the wind out of me. "Don't you ever yell at me again, old man," he said as I doubled over in pain. "I'm not a kid you can intimidate anymore." We took Elizabeth to the hospital, where she got 8 stitches. We told the emergency room doctor it had been a domestic accident, too ashamed to admit that our own son had assaulted his mother. At 20, in 2008, Adam committed what I considered the most painful betrayal up to that point. Elizabeth had inherited a collection of family jewelry from her mother, including a pair of cultured pearl earrings, a white gold necklace with diamonds that I gave her for our 20th anniversary, and a Cartier watch that had belonged to her father. One morning in March, Elizabeth discovered that her jewelry box had been completely emptied. Jewelry worth approximately $15,000 was missing. When we confronted Adam, we found the receipts from the gold and silver pawn shop on Feria Street, where he had sold all the pieces for a mere $4,200. "I needed the money to pay off debts," he confessed without remorse. "What kind of debts?" I asked. "Gambling debts and other things," he answered evasively. We later found out from our neighbor, Edward Santos, who worked for the National Police, that Adam owed money to cocaine dealers from the South Polygon neighborhood. "Mr. Miller," he told me discreetly, "I've seen your son with some very dangerous people." Despite everything, Elizabeth never lost hope. We spent a fortune on rehabilitation treatments. The Street Teresa Detox Clinic cost us $18,000 in 2008. Adam came out seemingly clean, but 3 weeks later we found him using again. In 2012, we paid another $22,000 for the rehabilitation program at the New Horizon Clinic in Malaga. Adam stayed there for 6 months. When he returned, he seemed genuinely sorry. "Mom, Dad," he told us, with tears in his eyes, "this time it's going to be different. For almost a year, We believed he had really changed. He got a job as a salesman at an appliance store. He kept regular hours, had even started a relationship with a girl who seemed to be a good influence. But in December 2013, the mask fell off again. One night, Elizabeth caught him stealing money from my wallet while I was asleep. He had taken $800 that I had set aside for Christmas expenses. That was the last straw. I told him he was no longer welcome in our house until he proved with actions, not words, that he had truly changed. Now, sitting in my study at 5 inches the morning, remembering these painful episodes, I realized that all the signs had been there from the beginning. Adam had never shown genuine remorse, never shown real love for us. For him, Elizabeth and I had been nothing but a source of money. The recording on my phone confirmed what my heart had feared for decades. I had raised a predator who had murdered his own mother and was now planning to murder me too. But this time, unlike all the others, I was ready to face him. The dawn of March 16th arrived with a mental clarity I hadn't experienced since Elizabeth's death. After hours of sleeplessness, analyzing every detail of the recording and reviewing the painful memories of Adam's life, I had made an irrevocable decision. I would not be a passive victim of my son's murderous plans. At 8 a.m. sharp, I dialed the number of Michael Torres's law firm, my trusted lawyer for the past 20 years. Michael had handled all the important legal matters of my life. The incorporation of my textile company in 1995, the purchase of our house in Lincoln Park in 1998, and more recently, the sale of the business in January 2023. "Good morning, Torres Law," replied the secretary, Christine Moreno, with her usual professional voice. "Good morning, Christine. This is Robert Miller. I need to speak with Mr. Torres urgently. It's a matter of extreme gravity." "Mr. Miller," her tone immediately changed to one of condolence. "Please accept my deepest sympathies for the passing of Mrs. Elizabeth. Mr. Torres told me about the funeral." "Thank you, Christine. Could I see him this morning? It's really urgent." There was a pause as she checked the schedule. "Mr. Torres has a meeting at 10, but I can rearrange his schedule. Would 9:30 work for you?" "Perfect, I'll be there." Michael's office was located in a stately 19th century building on State Street, in the heart of historic downtown Chicago. He had rented these offices in 2010 after his legal practice grew considerably. The monthly rent was $2,800, but the prestigious location was worth every penny. I arrived 15 minutes early, needing to walk the cobblestone streets to calm my nerves. The weight of the cell phone in my pocket felt like a ticking time bomb. It contained evidence that could send my own son to prison, but it also represented the only way to protect my life and get justice for Elizabeth. Michael Torres was 58, with perfectly slicked-back gray hair, and always wore impeccably tailored suits. I had known him since 2004, when I needed legal advice to expand my textile business. Over these 2 decades, we had developed a relationship that went beyond the strictly professional. He knew the family situation with Adam intimately. "Robert," he greeted me with a brotherly hug. "I have no words to express how sorry I am for the loss of Elizabeth. She was an extraordinary woman. Thank you, Michael. But I've come for something more serious than my personal grief." His expression changed immediately. Michael had a knack for reading people, and something in my tone told him this was a serious matter. "Please, sit down. What's happened?" For the next 20 minutes, I told him everything. Adam's threats at the funeral, the conversation I had accidentally recorded, my suspicions about Elizabeth's death, and my son's plan to murder me as well. Michael listened without interrupting, but I saw his expression gradually harden. "Do you have the recording with you?" he asked when I finished my story. I took out my Samsung Galaxy phone, which I had bought the previous year, and played the audio. Adam's cold voice filled the office. "It's done. Now all that's left is the old man." Michael listened to the entire recording twice, taking notes in his brown leather notebook. When he was finished, he took off his reading glasses and looked at me with a mixture of horror and professional determination. "Robert, this is evidence of conspiracy to commit murder and a possible confession of murder," he said gravely. "We need to act immediately, but also with great caution. What do you recommend? First, we're going to make several copies of this recording and deposit them in safe places. Second, you need to go to the police immediately. And third, we need to review your will and take preventive measures to protect your assets." Michael went to his safe, a Fichet Bosch, which he had installed after a robbery attempt in 2018. He took out several digital storage devices and began making copies of the recording. "Have you noticed anything strange in Adam's behavior over the past few months?" he asked me as he worked. "Now that I think about it, yes. During the last 3 months of Elizabeth's life, Adam increased his visits. At first, I thought he was finally showing filial concern, but he always made comments about the medical expenses. What kind of comments? He said the medications were very expensive, that maybe not all of them were necessary, that we were wasting money on care that wouldn't improve her condition. He once even suggested it would be more humane to let Elizabeth rest in peace. Michael stopped writing and looked at me intently. Did Adam have access to Elizabeth's medications? The question hit me like a lightning bolt. Yes, frequently. Rose, the nurse, sometimes went out to do errands or took short breaks. Adam would stay alone with his mother on those occasions. And Rose never mentioned anything strange about the medications or Elizabeth's condition. I started to remember. Now that you mention it, Rose commented to me several times during the last few weeks that Elizabeth seemed weaker than expected, considering her medication. Once she told me that the heart medication didn't seem to be having the expected effect. Michael finished making the copies and put one in the safe, another in his personal desk, and gave me a third. Keep this in a very safe place, preferably in a bank safe deposit box. What do we do now? Now you go directly to the Central Police Station. Ask for Inspector James Morales. He's an old friend of mine, a specialist in family crimes and homicides. I'm going to call him to prepare him. Michael dialed a number on his landline. James, it's Michael Torres. I have a very delicate situation that requires your immediate attention. Yes, it involves possible homicide and conspiracy. A very respectable client. Can you see him this morning? After hanging up, he explained the procedure. James will see you at 11:30. You will file a formal complaint and hand over the recording. He will decide if a criminal investigation is warranted. And my will do that this afternoon. After you talk to the police, come back here at 4. We're going to draft a completely new will that protects your assets from Adam's intentions. Michael got up from his desk and went to a filing cabinet where he kept all my legal documents. He pulled out my current will, dated April 2018. According to this document, Adam is your sole universal heir, he said as he reviewed the pages. If something were to happen to you tomorrow, he would inherit everything. The house valued at $380,000, your savings of approximately $920,000, and all the investments. The reality of my situation hit me completely. Adam not only planned to murder me, but legally he was entitled to everything Elizabeth and I had built over decades of honest work. Michael, I want it to be clear from this moment on, Adam is not going to receive a single cent of my estate. Understood. This afternoon we will draft a new will. Have you thought about alternative beneficiaries? The question made me think. Elizabeth and I never had other children, and our closest relatives were distant cousins with whom we barely kept in touch. I want to leave most of it to charities. I decided at that moment. Elizabeth always supported the work of Caritas Chicago and the Save the Children Foundation, and I also want to establish a university scholarship in her memory for low-income education students. Excellent idea. And for Adam? If he survives all this and is in prison, let him receive a minimal amount, enough to show that I didn't forget him by mistake, but insufficient to finance the lavish lifestyle he plans with my money. Michael took detailed notes. I suggest perhaps $15,000, on the condition that he can only access that money after serving any criminal sentence he might receive. Perfect. Before I left, Michael gave me specific instructions for the next few days. Robert, it's crucial that you act normally around Adam. He must not suspect that you know anything. If he contacts you, respond naturally. If he visits you, receive him as always. But never be alone with him. Leaving Michael's office at 10:15, I headed directly to the police station. The weight of what I was about to do overwhelmed me. I was going to report my own son for murder and conspiracy. But with every step I took, I got closer to the justice Elizabeth deserved and the protection I needed to survive. The Chicago morning had turned sunny, a dramatic contrast to the darkness of the crimes I was about to report. As I walked the streets I had traveled for decades, I realized that my life as I knew it was coming to an end. But for the first time since the funeral, I felt like I was in control of my destiny. The Central Police Station stood imposing before me, its limestone facade reflecting the seriousness of the moment I was living. It was 11:20 inches the morning when I walked through the main doors, carrying not only the recording that could change everything, but also the crushing weight of being about to report my own son. Inspector James Morales received me in his second-floor office, a stark but functional space decorated only with police diplomas and official photographs. Morales was about 50 years old, with a sturdy build, a meticulously trimmed gray mustache, and the penetrating gaze that characterizes experienced investigators. "Mr. Miller," he greeted me with a firm handshake. "Michael Torres has given me some details of your situation. Please sit down and tell me everything from the beginning." For the next hour, I meticulously recounted the events of the funeral, the recorded conversation, my suspicions about Elizabeth's death, and Adam's troubled history. The inspector listened with professional attention, occasionally interrupting to clarify specific dates or technical details. "Do you have the medical and pharmacy bills from your wife's last few months?" he asked, while taking notes in a blue folder. "Yes. I keep everything meticulously." Elizabeth was on multiple medications. "Yes. Warfarin for anticoagulation, enalapril for blood pressure, digoxin for heart rhythm, and several nutritional supplements prescribed by the neurologist." "Who had physical access to these medications?" "Mainly me, Rose the nurse, and occasionally Adam when he was left alone with his mother during Rose's breaks." Morales looked up from his notes. "How often was Adam left alone with Mrs. Elizabeth?" I began to recall with precision. "During the last 3 months, he significantly increased his visits. He would come 3 or 4 times a week, usually on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons and Saturday mornings. Rose used to take those opportunities to go shopping at the supermarket on Asuncion Street. Did you notice any changes in your wife's health that coincided with these visits?" The question forced me to retrospectively analyze those painful months. Now that I think about it, yes. After Adam's visits, Elizabeth seemed more drowsy than usual. Rose commented to me several times that the medication levels didn't seem to correspond with the reactions she was observing. The inspector leaned forward. "Can you be more specific about the nurse's comments?" Rose told me, verbatim. "Mr. Miller, it's strange. Mrs. Elizabeth is taking the correct dose of digoxin, but her heart rate is behaving as if she were receiving a larger amount. She also mentioned that Elizabeth's periods of deep sleep had intensified noticeably." Morales made an important note. "We're going to need to speak with this nurse immediately." "Do you have her contact information?" I provided Rose's phone number and address. The inspector immediately called one of his subordinates. "Officer Ruiz, I need you to urgently locate Mrs. Rose Martin for a priority interview." "Yes, related to the Miller case we just opened." After hanging up, Morales went to a metal filing cabinet and pulled out several official forms. "Mr. Miller, I'm going to take your formal statement and will need you to sign the official complaint. We are also going to immediately request the exhumation of your wife's body to perform a full toxicological examination." The word exhumation hit me emotionally. It meant disturbing Elizabeth's rest, but it also represented the only way to prove she had been murdered. "How long will that process take?" "The court order can be obtained in 24 to 48 hours, considering the seriousness of the accusations and the evidence you've presented. The toxicology analysis from the Institute of Legal Medicine will take about a week." While we completed the paperwork, Morales explained the investigative procedure. "We're going to discreetly tap your son's phone to monitor additional communications. We will also establish undercover surveillance to document his movements and any potential attempts against your safety. What should I do in the meantime?" "Act completely normal. If Adam contacts you, respond as you always have. Don't alter your daily routines, but take basic precautions. Don't consume any food or drinks that he may have tampered with. Don't allow him access to your vehicle, and keep this phone on 4 hours a day." He handed me a small GPS device. "Carry this with you at all times." At 2:30 in the afternoon, we received the first important call. Officer Ruiz had contacted Rose, who had agreed to come to the station immediately. She arrived 30 minutes later, visibly nervous but willing to cooperate. Rose Martin was 45 years old, with brown hair tied back in a professional ponytail, and was wearing her white nursing uniform. She had worked for 15 years at University General Hospital before dedicating herself to private home care. "Mrs. Martin," Morales began, "we want you to tell us everything you observed during the last few months of caring for Mrs. Elizabeth, especially any irregularities related to her medication or health status." Rose settled into the chair in front of the inspector's desk. "During the 6 months I cared for Mrs. Elizabeth, I noticed several strange things, especially in the last 3 months." "What kind of irregularities?" "Mrs. Elizabeth's medications were very well controlled. I prepared the daily doses in a weekly pill organizer every Sunday night, following the medical prescriptions exactly. But I began to notice that on some days, particularly after Mr. Adams' visits, the pills seemed to be altered." The inspector looked up immediately. "Can you explain what you mean by altered?" The digoxin pills are very small and white. On several occasions, after Mr. Adam had been alone with his mother, I found that some pills in the organizer looked slightly different, a little larger, as if they had been replaced with similar but not identical ones. My heart began to pound violently. Rose was confirming my worst suspicions. What did you do when you noticed these discrepancies? At first, I thought it was my imagination, but then I started documenting these observations in my personal nursing notebook. Rose took a small blue notebook from her purse. I have all the dates when I noticed irregularities written down here. Morales held out his hand. Could we review those notes? Rose opened the notebook and began to read. January 13. Digoxin pills seem different after A.M.'s visit. January 18. Mrs. Elizabeth extremely drowsy, more than normal for her medication. January 25. Again altered pills post-A. M. visit. Who is A.M.? The inspector asked. Adam Miller, the son. I use initials in my notes for confidentiality. Rose continued reading dates that corresponded exactly with Adam's visits. In total, she had documented 12 occasions over 3 months, where she noticed irregularities coinciding with my son's presence. Did you ever mention these observations to Mr. Robert Miller? Yes, several times. I told him that Mrs. Elizabeth's reaction to the medications was not consistent with the prescribed doses. I also mentioned that his wife seemed to be receiving higher amounts of sedatives than she should have been. Morales took extensive notes. Did Mr. Adams show a particular interest in his mother's medications? Too much interest, Rose replied firmly. He frequently asked me about dosages, administration times, and side effects. Once I found him in the bathroom where we kept the medications, checking the bottles. When was that? Rose consulted her notebook. February 8. I noted it because it seemed very strange. Family members don't usually show so much technical interest in medications. The inspector turned to me. Mr. Miller, with this information and the recording you've provided, we have sufficient grounds to immediately request the exhumation order and begin a formal criminal investigation. Rose provided us with additional crucial information. During the last 2 weeks of Elizabeth's life, Adam had repeatedly insisted that it was time to let Mom rest, and that so much suffering was not dignified. Mr. Adam asked me several times if there were medications that could speed up the natural process to avoid more suffering for his mother, Rose revealed. That question made me very uncomfortable. When we finished with Rose, it was 4:30 in the afternoon. Morales walked me to the main door of the station. Mr. Miller, in 72 hours, we will have preliminary results from the toxicology exam. In the meantime, maintain absolute discretion. Your son must not suspect that we are investigating. I left the station with a mixture of relief and apprehension. For the first time since the funeral, I felt that the proper authorities were taking my accusations seriously, but I also knew that the next few days would be critical, and that my own survival depended on maintaining the facade of a helpless, grieving old man, while justice built the case that would send Adam to prison for the murder of his own mother. I arrived at Michael Torres's office at 4 o'clock that afternoon, March 16th, after a day that had completely transformed my perspective on the future. The morning meeting with Inspector Morales had planted the seeds of justice, but now I needed to take immediate action to protect the assets that Elizabeth and I had built over decades of sacrifice and hard work. How was the meeting with James Morales? Michael asked me as he poured 2 cups of coffee into his elegant Royal Albert porcelain set. The police have opened a formal criminal investigation. They're going to exhume Elizabeth's body for toxicology analysis, and Rose has provided documentary evidence that supports my suspicions. Michael nodded with professional satisfaction. Excellent. Now we need to legally shield your assets before Adam suspects anything. I've prepared several documents that will require your signature. On his mahogany desk, he had spread out multiple folders containing legal documentation. Michael had worked all afternoon to prepare what he called Operation Asset Shield. First, he explained as he opened the first folder, we are going to immediately revoke your current will and draft a completely new one. Second, we will cancel all financial support you currently provide to Adam. And third, we will establish protective measures to prevent him from accessing your bank accounts. The new will Michael had prepared was drastically different from the previous one. Where Adam had been the universal beneficiary, he now appeared only as the recipient of $12,000, a symbolic amount that would show he had not been omitted by mistake. 70% of your estate, Michael explained, will go to 3 charities. Caritas Chicago will receive $300,000 for its family assistance programs. The Andalusian Cancer Foundation will receive $250,000, and Save the Children Spain will receive $200,000. And the rest, $200,000, will be used to establish the Elizabeth Reed Miller Scholarship for low-income education students at the University of Chicago. The remaining funds will cover legal and administrative expenses. While we reviewed each clause of the will, Michael informed me about the additional procedures he had initiated that afternoon. I've contacted Santander Bank where you have your main account. As of tomorrow morning, the additional credit card you provided to Adam will be canceled, as will his authorization to make transfers from your account. This measure was necessary but complicated. For the past 5 years, since his apparent rehabilitation in 2019, I had provided Adam with a credit card with a monthly limit of $1,500, mainly for food and emergencies. I had also authorized monthly transfers of $800 directly to his bank account at ING Bank, where he had his apartment rent in the Nervion neighborhood direct debited. How are we going to justify these changes, if Adam asks? Michael had anticipated this concern. We'll tell him that due to the funeral expenses and the grieving period, you need to reevaluate your personal finances. It's a believable explanation that won't arouse immediate suspicion. We had also coordinated with the real estate agency, Sevilla Sur, the company that managed the apartment where Adam lived. Michael had drafted an official letter notifying them that, as of next month, I would no longer be responsible for the monthly rent of $950. And if he can't pay the rent himself, that will be his problem, Michael replied firmly. A 5-year-old man should be able to support himself financially. Besides, considering what he plans to do to you, I think forced financial independence is the least he deserves. Over the next 2 hours, I signed dozens of documents. Revocation of the old will, the new will, bank cancellations, modifications to insurance policies, and changes in the ownership of certain investments. Michael had been meticulously thorough. I've also prepared this letter, he said, handing me a sealed envelope. It contains detailed instructions to be executed in case something happens to you before the situation with Adam is resolved. I've sent copies to 3 different notaries in Chicago. The contents of that letter included not only the testamentary provisions but also the location of all the evidence against Adam, including copies of the incriminating recording and Inspector Morales' contact information. An important question, Robert. Does Adam know the approximate amount of your assets? The question made me reflect on past conversations. During the sale of the company last year, I mentioned that we had received a good amount. He also knows that we own the house outright, and that our pensions allow us to live comfortably, but I've never given him exact figures. Perfect. That means he won't know immediately when you cut off his monthly financial support. Michael was right. The system we had established worked through automatic transfers on the 5th of each month. Adam usually spent all the money before the 15th, and then lived more frugally until the next transfer. If we canceled the payments immediately, he wouldn't notice until the beginning of April. What do we do with the house? I asked, referring to our property in Lincoln Park, valued at $380,000 according to the last municipal appraisal. I've included specific clauses in the will. If something happens to you, the house will be sold immediately, and the proceeds will go entirely to the designated charities. Adam will not be able to claim residency rights or attempt to contest the sale. When we finished all the legal paperwork, it was 7 p.m. Michael locked the original documents in his safe and gave me certified copies. Robert, I want you to understand something very important, he said as we prepared to leave. What you've done today is completely legal and ethically justified. A father has no obligation to leave an inheritance to a son who plans to murder him. Those words gave me the moral support I needed. For decades, I had felt the responsibility to support Adam despite his destructive behaviors, believing it was my paternal duty. But his homicidal plans had definitively broken any bond of family loyalty. When I got home that night, I found 3 missed calls from Adam on my landline. The messages on the answering machine showed an interesting progression. The first was apparently affectionate, asking how I was doing after the funeral. The second showed slight concern at not having received a response. The third contained a slightly more anxious tone. Dad, it's Adam. I've been trying to reach you since this morning. Are you okay? Natalie and I are worried. Please, call me when you get this message. The irony of his concern was almost comical to me, considering I knew exactly what he planned to do to me. I decided not to return the calls immediately, allowing the anxiety to build a little more. The next day, March 17th, Adam showed up at the house, unannounced. He arrived around noon, using the keys Elizabeth had given him years ago during a family emergency. "Dad," he said as he walked in, "I was worried because you weren't answering my calls. I've had some paperwork to deal with after the funeral," I replied naturally. "Legal documents, bank matters, you know." I saw a flash of immediate interest in his eyes. "What kind of bank matters?" "Nothing important. Updating beneficiaries on some accounts, reviewing investments. Your mother always handled some of these things, so now I have to reorganize everything." Adam sat on the living room sofa, pretending to be relaxed, but maintaining that calculating expression that I now recognized as dangerous. "Do you need help with anything? I can go to the bank with you if you want." "Thanks, son, but it's all taken care of." For the next 20 minutes, Adam made multiple indirect attempts to get information about my finances. He asked about life insurance policies, about whether I had updated my will, about whether I needed help organizing Elizabeth's important papers. Every question confirmed that his intentions were exactly what he had recorded in the cemetery. He wasn't visiting a grieving father. He was assessing the assets he planned to inherit after murdering me. "Dad," he finally said, "I want you to know that Natalie and I are here to support you in anything you need. I know the next few months are going to be tough, but you don't have to go through this alone." "I really appreciate that, Adam. It means a lot to know I can count on you." The words tasted bitter, but I maintained a convincing paternal tone. When he left 30 minutes later, I was certain that I had successfully begun the second phase of my plan. While he believed he was assessing a helpless victim, I had systematically cut all the financial ties that bound him to my estate. In 3 days, when he tried to use his credit card or didn't receive the monthly transfer, he would begin to realize that something had changed. But by then, the police investigation would have progressed enough to protect me from any desperate attempt to accelerate his homicidal plans. The silent war had begun, and for the first time in decades, I had the strategic advantage over my own son. The following days passed with a silent tension that only I could perceive. While I maintained my usual routine of a grieving widower, Inspector Morales and his team worked discreetly to build the case that would put an end to Adam's murderous plans. On March 19th, exactly 4 days after the funeral, I received the call I had been waiting for. "Mr. Miller." Morales's voice was grave but controlled. "We have the preliminary results of the toxicology analysis. I need you to come to the station immediately." During the taxi ride to the station, my mind alternated between the hope of getting justice for Elizabeth and the terror of definitively confirming that my son had murdered her. The taxi driver, an older man named Frank Delgado, according to his license, tried to make small talk, but I remained lost in my somber thoughts. In the inspector's office, the forensic lab documents were spread out on his desk like irrefutable evidence of a family monstrosity. Morales wasted no time with ceremonial preambles. "The analyses confirm our gravest suspicions," he began, adjusting his glasses to read the technical report. "Your wife's body contained toxic levels of digoxin, approximately 4 times the normal therapeutic dose. We also found traces of lorazepam, a sedative that was not prescribed in her medical treatment." The words hit my conscience like physical stabs. Elizabeth had been systematically poisoned for weeks, suffering a slow agony while I believed she was deteriorating from natural causes. "How did they get these substances?" I asked, though I feared the answer. "The extra digoxin probably came from additional pills dissolved in food or drinks. The lorazepam is more difficult to obtain, but we've discovered that your son has a history of benzodiazepine use. He probably kept a personal stash from when he was in rehab." Morales continued to explain the technical findings. "The concentration of these substances indicates gradual poisoning over approximately 6 weeks. The symptoms you described, excessive drowsiness, progressive weakness, episodes of confusion, are completely consistent with chronic intoxication by these drugs. Is that enough evidence to arrest him? Along with the recording you provided and the testimony of the nurse, Rose, we have a solid basis for a charge of premeditated murder, but we want to ensure a conviction with no possibility of a successful appeal." The inspector went to a whiteboard where he had drawn a detailed timeline of the last months of Elizabeth's life. "We've correlated the dates of your son's visits, documented by Rose, with the toxicity peaks shown in the forensic analyses. The correspondence is almost perfect. What do you need from me? We want to organize an undercover operation to obtain an additional confession and evidence of his plans to murder you as well." Morales explained the procedure they had in mind. "We're going to install professional recording equipment in your house, specifically in the living room and kitchen where you usually receive Adam. Then, You're going to invite him for an intimate conversation about the future, creating the conditions for him to reveal more details about his intentions. Isn't that dangerous? We'll have undercover agents on the street and an intervention team less than 2 minutes from your house. Plus, you'll wear this emergency device. He handed me a small red button. If you feel you're in immediate danger, press it, and we'll be there in less than 30 seconds. The operation was scheduled for March 22nd, a Friday afternoon. During the intervening days, Morales and his team discreetly transformed my home into a sophisticated technological trap. They installed ultra-sensitive microphones disguised in lamps and picture frames, miniaturized cameras and wall clocks, and digital recording systems hidden in the ventilation system. The audio quality will be perfect, the specialist technician, Albert Fernandez, assured me as he calibrated the equipment. Even if he whispers, we'll capture every word with judicial clarity. On Wednesday, March 20th, I called Adam to set the stage. Son, I've been thinking a lot about the future since your mother died. Could you come over on Friday afternoon? There are important things I need to discuss with you. His immediate response revealed his genuine interest. Of course, Dad. What's it about? I'd rather talk about it in person. It has to do with family planning and, well, I'm not young anymore and I need to get certain affairs in order. I could hear the barely contained satisfaction in his voice. I'll be there at 5. Do you want me to bring anything specific? Just your time and attention. We're going to have a very frank conversation about the future of this family. The days leading up to the operation passed slowly. Every time the phone rang, my heart raced, thinking it might be Adam changing his plans. Or worse, anticipating my intentions. But he kept minimal contact, apparently confident that his victim was preparing to voluntarily hand over all the information he needed. On Thursday night, I received an unexpected call that added another sinister dimension to the situation. Mr. Miller, it's Rose. I'm sorry to call you so late, but I have something important to tell you. Please, Rose, tell me. This afternoon, while I was shopping at the supermarket, I ran into Mr. Adam. He was at the attached pharmacy, buying several over-the-counter medications. When he saw me, he got very nervous and tried to hide what he was buying. My blood ran cold. Could you see what medications he bought? I managed to see that he had boxes of Navalgin and something that looked like a cough syrup with codeine in his hand. I also saw that he was carrying a bag from the central pharmacy, the one that specializes in more complex medications. Did he say anything to you? He asked me how I was doing after Mrs. Elizabeth's death, but in a very strange way, as if he were sizing me up. Then he asked me if you had mentioned any travel plans or changes in your daily routine. Adam's medication purchases confirmed that he was actively preparing his next attack. Inspector Morales, when I informed him of Rose's call, immediately stepped up the security measures. We're going to move up the operation, he told me over the phone. Your son is accelerating his plans, probably because he's noticed changes in his financial resources. Indeed, that very afternoon I had received a furious call from Adam when he discovered that his credit card had been canceled. Dad, what's going on with my card? I went to pay for gas, and it was declined. Oh yes, son. The bank recommended that I temporarily cancel all additional cards while I reorganize the accounts after your mother's death. It's standard protocol. When is it going to be resolved? In a few weeks, when I finish updating all the legal documentation. I could sense his contained frustration, but also something more dangerous. Desperation. A financially pressed Adam was an unpredictable and potentially more violent Adam. Friday, March 22nd, dawned cloudy but dry. At 3 p.m., the technicians did the final checks on all the recording equipment. At 4, the undercover agents took their positions at strategic points around my house. One in the playground across from the main entrance, another in the coffee shop on the corner, a third walking a borrowed dog through the neighborhood. At 10 to 5, I saw Adam's black Seat Leon park in front of my house. He was wearing a dark gray sweater and jeans, feigning casualness, but I noticed he was carrying a small backpack, which he didn't normally bring. Hello, Dad, he greeted me with a hug that now felt repugnant, knowing it came from the same hands that had murdered his mother. Come in, son. Have a seat on the sofa. Do you want some coffee? Yes, please. How have you been feeling these days? While I was making coffee in the kitchen, aware that every movement was being recorded, I noticed Adam discreetly scanning the living room with his eyes, as if evaluating something specific. I've been reflecting a lot on the future. I began when I returned with the cups. I'm not young anymore, and your mother's death has made me think about my own mortality. His eyes lit up with barely disguised interest. That's natural, Dad. Losing Mom has been hard for both of us. Adam, I need to ask you something directly. If something happened to me tomorrow, would you be prepared to handle all the family affairs, the house, the investments, the insurance? He leaned forward, his body language revealing total attention. Of course, Dad. You can completely trust me. It's just that there are so many complicated details. Bank accounts at different institutions, investments in mutual funds, the life insurance policy for $200,000. I deliberately lied about the amount of the insurance to provoke his reaction. His eyes widened slightly. I didn't know you had such a sizable insurance policy. Your mother insisted on keeping it up to date. She said it was our responsibility to secure your financial future. Adam was silent for a few moments, apparently calculating figures in his head. Dad, have you updated your will since Mom's death? The direct question confirmed his intentions. I haven't had time yet. Why do you ask? Well, it's important to keep these documents updated. You never know when they might be needed. For the next 40 minutes, Adam asked multiple questions about my finances, my health, my future plans. Each question was designed to assess how much longer he would have to wait before he could execute his homicidal plan. Then, with a coldness that chilled me to the bone, he asked the question we needed to record. Dad, after seeing Mom suffer so much, don't you think it's sometimes more merciful to help someone rest in peace? Adam's question about helping someone rest in peace hung in the air of the living room like an implicit confession of his murderous intentions. I knew every word was being recorded in professional quality by Inspector Morales' teams, but I needed to keep the conversation flowing to obtain even more incriminating evidence. What exactly do you mean by helping someone rest? I asked, feigning paternal curiosity while my heart pounded violently. Adam leaned back on the sofa, seemingly relaxing as he believed he had found an opening in my moral resistance. Well, Dad, there are discreet ways to avoid prolonged suffering. Medications that can speed up a natural process when someone is already weak, like you did with your mother? The words slipped out of my mouth before I could stop them. Adam tensed immediately, his eyes narrowing with sudden suspicion. What do you mean? Nothing specific. I tried to recover quickly, just that Elizabeth seemed very tired in her last weeks, as if she no longer had the strength to keep fighting. His expression partially relaxed, but I could tell he had become alert. Mom was suffering a lot. It was painful to see her like that. Yes, but at least she's at peace now. Exactly. And you, Dad, after everything you've been through, you deserve the same tranquility when your time comes. The conversation had taken a dangerous turn, but I needed to continue extracting confessions. Do you have experience with these discreet methods? Adam smiled with an expression that I found absolutely terrifying. I've done a lot of research on the subject. There are substances that are practically undetectable if administered correctly. What kind of substances? Cardiac medications in high doses can simulate a natural heart attack. Sedatives mixed with alcohol can look like an accident. The key is to know the exact amounts and methods of administration. Every word he spoke was additional evidence of criminal premeditation. But then, completely unexpectedly, he pulled a small bottle of white pills from his backpack. In fact, Dad, I brought something that can help you relax better at night. I know you've had trouble sleeping since Mom's death. The bottle contained about 20 pills that looked identical to the digoxin Elizabeth had been taking. My training with Inspector Morales had prepared me for this moment, but facing it in reality was infinitely more terrifying. That's very thoughtful of you, son. These pills are special, Adam continued with genuine enthusiasm. 1 or 2 will help you sleep deeply. 3 or 4 will guarantee you the most peaceful rest you can imagine. The word peaceful, spoken in English in the middle of our Spanish conversation, seemed particularly sinister, as if he were quoting from some murder manual he had studied. Where did you get these pills? I have my contacts. The pharmacist on Regina Street owes me a few favors from my more difficult times. He was clearly referring to the period when he was regularly using drugs and had connections with dealers and illegal suppliers of medications. Now those same connections were serving him to obtain chemical weapons, or rather, homicidal ones. Do you want me to take one now? I asked, needing to provoke a more explicit response. Well, Adam paused, calculated. You could take 2 or 3 with a little wine. It will help you process the loss of Mom better, and maybe find the peace you so desperately need. It was impossible to interpret his words innocently. He was literally suggesting that I commit suicide using the pills he had brought specifically for that purpose. And if it doesn't work? Oh, it'll work. These pills are very effective, especially if you combine them with your current blood pressure medication. Adam knew perfectly well that I took enalapril daily to control my hypertension. The combination he was suggesting would be lethal, and he knew it. At that moment, I decided to push the conversation towards his most direct confession. Adam, I need to ask you something very serious. Did you help your mother find peace during her last days? His eyes gleamed with something I can only describe as criminal pride. Dad, Mom was suffering terribly. The doctors said she could live like that for years, completely dependent on care, without dignity, spending all our family savings on useless treatments. So, I provided her with the mercy that the medical system denied her. I gradually increased her doses of digoxin and added some mild sedatives so she wouldn't feel pain. She died peacefully, without prolonged agony. He had completely confessed to his mother's murder, and the recording equipment had captured every word. But I also needed to get clear evidence of his plans for me. And do you think I could benefit from the same act of mercy? Dad, you're 67 years old. You've lived a full life. You've lost your lifelong partner, and physically you're no longer the strong man you used to be. Do you really want to spend the next few years slowly deteriorating, dependent on strange caregivers, spending your entire inheritance on hospitals and medications? What do you propose? Adam leaned forward, lowering his voice, as if sharing an intimate secret. I propose that you take these pills tonight, with a glass of your favorite whiskey. You'll fall asleep peacefully and simply not wake up. It will be natural, painless, without prolonged suffering. And after? After, I'll take care of everything. The funerals, the legal paperwork, the sale of the house. You'll be reunited with Mom, and I will use the inheritance to honor her memory in the most appropriate way. The hypocrisy of his words was nauseating, but I had gotten exactly what the police needed: a full confession of premeditated murder and an explicit request for assisted suicide. That's a very considerate proposal, I said, trying to buy time while I mentally processed the situation. Think about it, Dad, there's no hurry. But remember that prolonged suffering is not dignified for a man of your caliber. At that moment, we heard a noise in the kitchen, as if something had fallen. Adam tensed immediately. What was that? Probably the neighbor's cat. Sometimes it sneaks in through the back window, but I knew it was the prearranged signal with Inspector Morales. The agents were ready to intervene if necessary. Adam, I decided to ask one last crucial question. What would you do if I didn't accept your proposal voluntarily? His expression changed subtly, showing for the first time a genuine hardness. Well, Dad, there are other ways to ensure you find the peace you need. Domestic accidents, sudden heart problems, unexplained falls. Men your age are vulnerable to many unforeseen circumstances. Are you threatening me? No, Dad. I'm explaining the realities of life. With or without your cooperation, you're going to find peace very soon. I'd prefer it to be by your own decision, but if necessary. He didn't finish the sentence, but its meaning was crystal clear. If I didn't voluntarily commit suicide that night using his pills, he would find another way to murder me in the coming days. I think I need time to think about your proposal, I finally said. Of course, but not too much time. Every day you spend suffering is a day lost. Adam placed the bottle of pills on the coffee table, as if it were a poisoned gift waiting to be opened. Then he stood up, apparently satisfied with the results of our conversation. I'm leaving now, Dad. Think about what we've talked about. I'll come by tomorrow morning to see how you're feeling. Until tomorrow, son. When he closed the front door behind him, I remained motionless for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what I had experienced. My own son had not only confessed to murdering his mother, but had literally provided me with the means to commit suicide, and then had threatened to kill me if I didn't cooperate voluntarily. 5 minutes after Adam left, Inspector Morales entered through the back door, along with 3 more agents. Robert, are you all right? Was his first question. Physically, yes. But emotionally, I don't know how to process what I just heard. You've been extraordinarily brave. The recording we've obtained is enough evidence to guarantee a conviction for first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Morales picked up the pill bottle using latex gloves. We're going to immediately analyze the contents of these pills. I bet they contain lethal doses of the same drugs he used to kill his mother. When are you going to arrest him? Tomorrow morning, when he returns to check on your decision. We'll have teams in position to capture him the moment he enters this house. I couldn't sleep that night. I knew that in less than 12 hours, my son would be in police custody, facing charges that could send him to prison for decades. It was the inevitable end of a life of destructive behaviors, but it also represented the final collapse of any hope for family redemption. At dawn on March 23rd, I mentally prepared myself for the moment when justice would finally catch up with Adam Miller for the crimes he had committed against his own family. The morning of the 23rd of March 2024 will forever be remembered as the day justice finally caught up with my son. At 8:30 sharp, just as he had promised the night before, Adam's black CA Leon parked in front of my house. From the second-story window, I could see him get out of the vehicle with confident movements, again carrying his backpack, probably containing more instruments for his homicidal plan. Inspector Morales and his team had transformed my neighborhood into an invisible surveillance network. Plainclothes agents occupied strategic positions. One read the newspaper on a park bench, another walked a borrowed dog, a third pretended to repair his motorcycle near the corner. Unmarked cars were positioned at points that would block any escape route. When Adam rang the doorbell at 8:45, I opened the door with the same casualness as always, aware that this would be our last conversation as a free father and son. "Good morning, Dad," he greeted me with that fake smile that I now recognized as a predator's mask. "How did you sleep last night?" "Very badly, actually. I was thinking a lot about our conversation yesterday." His eyes lit up with barely contained expectation. "And did you come to any conclusion?" "Yes, but I'd rather we talk inside." As we walked to the living room, I noticed Adam discreetly checking to see if I had moved the pill bottle he had left on the coffee table. It was in the exact same position, and his expression showed satisfaction when he confirmed it. "Adam," I began once we were seated, after thinking all night, "I think you're right about a lot of things." He leaned forward, completely focused. "About what specifically?" "About unnecessary suffering. About dignity at the end of life. About finding peace, like your mother did." "I'm glad to hear that, Dad. It means you understand that I only want what's best for you." At that moment, according to the agreed-upon plan, I asked, "Could you explain to me exactly how you helped your mother? I want to make sure my process is just as peaceful." Adam practically beamed with criminal pride. "Of course. During the last 6 weeks of Mom's life, I gradually increased her digoxin dose. I started by adding half a pill dissolved in her vegetable soup on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Then I increased it to a full pill on the days Rose went shopping. She didn't suspect a thing. Rose noticed some changes, but she attributed them to Mom's natural decline. I also added lorazepam, which I had kept from my days in rehab, 2 milligrams mixed into her afternoon chamomile tea. Every word was an additional confession recorded in high definition by the hidden police equipment. How long did it take for her to find peace? About 5 weeks. The last few days were especially effective when I combined both drugs with small doses of liquid morphine that I got through contacts at the hospital. Morphine? How did you get it? Paul Sanchez, a nurse I met during one of my detox treatments, provided me with 10 milliliters vials for $200 each. There were 3 vials in total. His accomplice's name would be valuable information for the police investigation. Adam continued detailing his homicidal methodology with a coldness that I found even more terrifying because it came from my own son. The key is in the gradual dosage. If I had used high amounts from the beginning, it would have been too obvious. But by slowly increasing the doses over weeks, the body partially adapts, and the symptoms look like a natural progression of the disease. And what do you recommend for me? For you it will be simpler because you don't have a nurse watching over you. The pills I brought yesterday each contain 0.5 milligrams of digoxin. If you take 6 pills with a glass of whiskey tonight, you'll be asleep in 2 hours, and you'll never wake up. 6 pills? It's the perfect dose for your body weight and age. It will be completely painless, I promise you. Then I asked the question that Inspector Morales had considered crucial. What if I change my mind and don't want to take the pills voluntarily? Adam's friendly mask completely vanished, revealing the genuine cruelty he had been hiding for decades. "Dad, we've come too far to back out now. If you don't take the pills voluntarily tonight, tomorrow I'll have to find another solution." "What kind of solution?" "I could mix the crushed pills into your morning coffee or sabotage the brakes on your car so you have an accident on the Carmona Highway. Or just come one night while you're asleep and give you an insulin injection that will simulate a fatal diabetic coma." "You have insulin?" Paul also got me pre-filled syringes of rapid-acting insulin. 50 units directly into the neck produces immediate hypoglycemic shock. For a man your age, it would be fatal in less than 20 minutes. The meticulous planning of my murder horrified me, but it also confirmed that we had made the right decision by involving the authorities. "Adam, there's something I need to understand. Why are you so willing to kill me? I'm your father." His response revealed the depth of his sociopathy. "Dad, You and Mom have been obstacles to my true potential my whole life, always criticizing me, sending me to therapy, limiting my access to the money that rightfully belongs to me as your only son. We've supported you financially for decades." "Crumbs!" he suddenly shouted, showing the anger he had been containing. $1,500 a month when this house is worth $400,000, when you have almost $1 million in savings, when you could have given me the financial independence I deserve. And now, with you both dead, I'll have full access to everything. Natalie and I will move to Costa Rica, where we'll live as we deserve. We'll buy a farm in Manuel Antonio, a yacht. We'll travel the world without ever worrying about money again. You already have specific plans. We've done extensive research. With $1,200,000, we can live luxuriously in Costa Rica for 20 years. After that, if necessary, we'll come back to Spain and settle in Marbella or Ibiza." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of my cell phone. It was the prearranged signal with Morales. "Excuse me a moment, Adam. I have to take this call." "Of course, Dad. Take your time." I walked to the kitchen, pretending to talk on the phone, but actually activating the microphone that would confirm to the agents outside that I was ready for the intervention. When I returned to the living room, Adam had taken a pre-filled syringe and a small vial of clear liquid from his backpack. "What's that?" I asked, though I feared the answer. "Rapid-acting insulin, in case you decide you need a little extra help making the right decision." At that exact moment, the front door flew open violently. Inspector Morales entered, followed by 4 armed agents, all shouting simultaneously. "Police! Hands up!" Adam's expression changed instantly from calculated control to absolute panic. He tried to hide the syringe behind his back, but it was too late. "Adam Miller, you are under arrest for premeditated murder and conspiracy to commit murder," Morales shouted as 2 agents pinned him to the floor. "You old traitor." Adam yelled at me as they cuffed him. "It was all yours. It all should have been mine." His shouts continued as they dragged him to the patrol car. "You've ruined my life. 35 years of putting up with your control. This is all your fault." The absolute lack of remorse in his words confirmed that we had made the right decision. Even facing arrest for murder, Adam blamed me for his own criminal choices. The trial began 6 months later, in September 2024. The prosecutor, Dr. Anthony Herrera, presented a meticulous case that included the complete recordings, detailed forensic analyses, medical testimony about the poisoning, and physical evidence of all the drugs Adam had used to murder Elizabeth. Rose testified for 3 hours, describing every irregularity she had observed. Her nursing notebook provided an irrefutable chronological record of the systematic poisoning. Paul Sanchez, the accomplice nurse, was arrested 2 days after Adam. During his interrogation, he confessed to providing liquid morphine and insulin in exchange for money, thinking they would be used for personal recreational consumption. The most difficult moment of the trial came when I had to testify directly against my son. For 2 consecutive days, I recounted the complete story to the court. The behavioral problems since childhood, the episodes of domestic violence, the theft of family jewelry, the threats at the funeral, and finally, the recorded confessions. Adam stared at me from the defendant's table with pure hatred, never showing any remorse or acknowledging the harm he had caused. The verdict came after only 3 hours of jury deliberation. Guilty of first-degree murder, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty of illegal possession of controlled substances. The sentence was handed down a week later. 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole until he had served at least 15 years. Natalie Vega received 8 years as an accomplice for her knowledge and support of the criminal plans. When the judge read the sentence, Adam showed no emotion. He simply looked at me one last time with that expression of hatred that had definitively replaced any vestige of the boy I once thought I loved unconditionally. Leaving the courthouse, Inspector Morales walked me to my car. "Robert, I know this has been extremely difficult for you. Testifying against your own son requires extraordinary courage." "It's what Elizabeth would have wanted," I replied. "She always believed in justice. My son had chosen the path of evil, but I had chosen the path of justice. Elizabeth could rest in peace, knowing that her murderer would face the full consequences of his monstrous actions." 2 years have passed since the judge's gavel definitively sealed Adam Miller's fate. 2 years in which I have had to rebuild not only my daily life, but also my fundamental understanding of fatherhood, family, and forgiveness. I am writing these final lines from the study of my new home in the Wicker Park neighborhood, a smaller but light-filled apartment I bought after selling the property in Lincoln Park, where so many painful episodes occurred. The decision to move was not easy. That house held 42 years of shared memories with Elizabeth. Our first arguments about decorating in 1982, the family Christmases when Adam was still an innocent child, the Sunday afternoons reading newspapers in the backyard that Elizabeth tended with such care. But it also harbored the last 6 months of my wife's agony and the revelation of our son's monstrosity. The proceeds from the sale, $385,000 according to the final appraisal in February 2025, were donated entirely to the charities specified in my revised will. Caritas Chicago used its portion to establish a crisis center for families in domestic distress. The irony was not lost on me. The money tainted by Adam's crime now served to protect other families from similar situations of violence. My current routine would have been unthinkable 3 years ago, when my life revolved completely around caring for Elizabeth and constantly worrying about Adam's problems. Now I get up every morning at 7, have a quiet breakfast while reading the news, and dedicate the first hours of the day to correspondence related to the Elizabeth Reed Miller Foundation, the organization I established to administer the university scholarships in my wife's memory. To date, we have awarded 23 full scholarships to education students from working-class families. Every semester, I receive letters from these young people telling me about their academic progress, their dreams of becoming teachers, their plans to transform education in the region. Reading these letters connects me to Elizabeth's true legacy, far more meaningful than any material inheritance Adam could have squandered. On Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, I volunteer at the Sacred Heart Nursing Home on Resolana Street. I initially started this activity as personal therapy, seeking purpose after the family tragedy, but it has become one of my greatest sources of satisfaction. I spend time with residents who, like me, have lost their life partners, but who, unlike me, face their final years without the financial support necessary to live with dignity. Mr. Edward Vasquez, 83, has become one of my closest friends. He was a carpenter for 50 years, built furniture for 3 generations of Chicago families, but his children emigrated to Germany in search of better opportunities and now barely maintain monthly phone contact. Robert, he tells me during our weekly domino games, the saddest thing is not growing old alone, but discovering that the children you sacrificed everything for consider you a burden. His words resonate deeply with my experience, although for opposite reasons. Adam never considered me a burden. He considered me an obstacle to accessing resources he believed he deserved by birthright. The difference is crucial. Mr. Vasquez was abandoned by ungrateful children. I was victimized by a criminal son. During these 2 years, I have received exactly 3 letters from Adam from the Chicago I Prison, where he is serving his sentence. The first arrived 6 months after the trial, containing an apparently sincere apology and promises of genuine rehabilitation. The second, a year later, had a more desperate tone, asking for financial support to hire a better lawyer who could appeal his sentence. The third, received just 2 months ago, was pure venom. He blamed me again for all his problems, accused me of betraying him by cooperating with the police, and ended with veiled threats about what might happen when he was released. I have never answered any of these letters. My psychologist, Dr. Gabriel Moreno, a specialist in family trauma whom I have been consulting monthly since October 2024, has helped me understand that maintaining any kind of communication with Adam would be counterproductive for both my emotional recovery and his supposed one. Robert, he explained during one of our sessions, you have no moral obligation to maintain a relationship with someone who tried to murder you, regardless of the biological ties that connect you. Family is defined by love and mutual respect, not by genetics. This perspective has freed me from the residual guilt I felt for having betrayed my son by turning him over to the authorities. I didn't betray a son. I protected society from a dangerous criminal who happened to share my DNA. On Friday mornings, I attend Mass at St. Catherine's Parish, the same church where Elizabeth and I were married so many years ago. At first, my faith had been deeply shaken. How could a benevolent God allow a son to murder his own mother? Where was divine justice when Elizabeth was being gradually poisoned, while I naively believed she was deteriorating from natural causes? Father Anthony Ruiz, the parish priest since 2018, has gradually helped me rebuild my spiritual understanding. Mr. Miller, he told me during a conversation that marked a turning point in my recovery, God does not prevent the evil that human beings choose to commit, but he does provide the strength for victims to find justice and peace. On Sundays, I have lunch with Rose Martin and her family. She has become an invaluable friend, someone who shared those final moments and understands both my pain and my gratitude for having brought her murderer to justice. Mr. Miller, Rose said to me during our last family lunch. Mrs. Elizabeth would be very proud of everything you have accomplished these past 2 years. You honored her memory by seeking justice, but you also honor her every day by helping students and the elderly. I have also started to travel, something Elizabeth and I always postponed due to family responsibilities and financial concerns. In November 2024, I took the Mediterranean cruise we had planned for our 45th anniversary. I visited Porto, Portugal, the destination Elizabeth mentioned during our last family dinner before her stroke. These trips are not an escape from pain, but a celebration of the freedom I have regained after decades dedicated to caring for a sick wife and worrying about a troubled son. For the first time in my adult life, my daily decisions are based solely on my own desires and values. Next month, I will turn 70. It is an age that Elizabeth never reached, stolen by the murderous hands of our own son. But it is also an age that I did not expect to reach in relatively good mental and physical health, considering the homicidal plans Adam had for me. My finances are completely reorganized and protected. The new will remains in effect. The charities will receive the bulk of my remaining estate. Adam retains his symbolic $12,000 allowance, and I have added specific provisions for Rose and a few close friends who have become my chosen family. I have forgiven Adam in the sense that I no longer allow hatred for him to control my daily emotional state. But forgiveness does not mean reconciliation or restoration of trust. He made choices that irrevocably destroyed our family relationship, and the consequences of those choices are permanent. This story I have told is not only my personal testimony, but also a warning to other families who may be facing similar situations. Behavioral problems in childhood, domestic violence, substance abuse, and especially a consistent lack of genuine remorse, are warning signs that should not be ignored out of misplaced family loyalty. Elizabeth and I made the mistake of confusing paternal love with infinite tolerance for destructive behavior. We believed that our duty as parents was to support Adam regardless of his actions. Now I understand that true paternal love sometimes requires setting absolute limits and allowing adult children to face the full consequences of their decisions. My final message to those who may find themselves in similar toxic family situations is simple but crucial. Shared blood does not grant a perpetual right to abuse or manipulate. True family is built on mutual respect, not on infinite tolerance for destructive behavior. I now live with a serenity I haven't experienced in decades. Elizabeth rests in peace, knowing that her murderer is facing justice. Adam is paying the consequences of his criminal choices, and I, at 70, have discovered that it is never too late to rebuild a life based on authentic values and genuine relationships. This is my story, a story of family betrayal, but also of survival, justice, and the possibility of finding purpose and peace even after the deepest tragedies life can inflict. The truth finally set me free. If you like this story, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box on the left. Thanks for watching,